Hi guys, welcome back to Kubrick Corner with me, Sean Wilson. So I've been lucky enough to attend the London Film Festival over the past couple of days. I'm due to go back up there on Saturday to round off what has been a really interesting season of films. I've been very lucky to see some terrific ones. I've seen Call Me by Your Name, the new movie with Armie Hammer, beautiful gay romantic drama that's really sublime. I saw Richard Linklater's new movie Last Flag Flying, that stars Steve Carell, Bryan Cranston, and Lawrence Fishburne. Again, really good. But I'm here today to talk about what I think has been the highlight of my LFF 2017 experience, which I was lucky enough to see on Tuesday, which is Guillermo Del Toro's The Shape of Water, which really is something special. I'm smiling just thinking about it. That's how good this film is. When a movie can induce that kind of physical response when you just say the title, you know you've got something good on your hands. So what to say about The Shape of Water? Well, as I said, Guillermo del Toro's new film he made, Pan's Labyrinth, Kronos, Devil's Backbone, Mimic, Hellboy, Pacific Rim, Crimson Peak. I think I've just rattled off pretty much all of his films there, I think. And it's very much in his wheelhouse. It's a fable fairy tale with romantic and often violent and horrifying overtones, but in an intriguing twist from Del Toro's normal approach. This is actually set in a much more recognisable landscape. It's not set in, for example, the gothic, shadowy, sort of mood-soaked environs of something like Crimson Peak, which owed a lot to the overwrought fiction of the 19th century. This is actually set in 1960s Cold War small-town America, which is actually very interesting, and that actually gives the movie a somewhat fresher edge than say something like Crimson Peak, which I found quite emotionally sterile. The recognisability of the landscape in this particular Del Toro film really galvanises the whole thing. So it centres on a brilliant Sally Hawkins as a mute janitor, Eliza, who operates by a very sort of clockwork-like routine. And clockwork is a regular motif in Del Toro's movies. Except in this particular film, the clockwork mechanics aren't so much explicit. It's more of a metaphorical thing, because we see Eliza going through her routine. She lives above a cinema, wonderfully, which shows all manner of biblical epics like Cleopatra. We see that on the screen. She gets up, she follows the same routine. She goes to work at a government lab where she is the janitor alongside the brilliant Octavia Spencer. Octavia Spencer giving it a lot of sass and brass, as she always does. I can watch Octavia Spencer in anything. She's fantastic. It's their job to basically just be the help and be completely anonymous and clean this lab. They happen to be in one of the labs when a mysterious asset is brought in as being overseen by a fantastically creepy and intimidating Michael Shannon. I mean, who else to play that sort of character? He is the agent tasked with this asset, which turns out to be an amphibious humanoid reptile-like creature with whom Hawkins eventually starts to bond, and she finds herself caught in the middle of this battle between, on the one hand, Michael Shannon, who wants to destroy the creature for fear that the Soviets will get their hands on it. Remember, this is Cold War America, it's early 1960s, Cold War paranoia is at its peak. And on the other hand, Michael Stuhlbarg, who is the doctor, who wants to preserve the creature and learn from it. And Sally Hawkins is right in the middle. Sally Hawkins is the only one who makes an emotional connection with the creature and can identify with its sense of isolation and despair in many ways, because she, being mute, she finds it harder to connect with the wider world outside of the world of music in the form of Benny Goodman and films. She finds it very hard to connect with the wider world. That is, except for her brilliantly funny and spiky friendship with her next door neighbour, played by Richard Jenkins. Again, Richard Jenkins is one of those actors who can turn up in practically anything and make it better. Richard Jenkins is absolutely wonderful in this, as indeed are all the actors. And I think this is the reason why I like the film so much, because all of the characters in this movie are really well defined. Normally in Del Toro's movies, you get the odd character that's really well defined. I think this is the first film I've seen of his where it's really an ensemble effort, where every single actor and every single character gets a really interesting life. So, for example, you have the Richard Jenkins as the next door neighbour, who is as lonely as Eliza, and you find out why that is. I won't spoil why, but that's actually one of the most pointed and moving moments of the film when you find out why that is. You got Michael Shannon as the hideous government scientist who is predatory and creepy and violent and bullying. And yet, in the first indication I got that this movie was actually going to be possibly Guillermo Del Toro's richest character-driven drama to date, or at least it is next to Pan's Labyrinth, is that you actually get to see the home life of Shannon's character. He has a wife, he has young children. He is shown to be quite appalling to his wife at one stage, but that's a side of the character that you don't often get to see with these kind of cliche character developments. And in one of the best scenes in the movie, we actually see that Shannon's character, in spite of the authority that he wields, actually has that craving for 1960s materialistic American dream style living. He wants to own a Cadillac. He wants all that. So these characters are really, really interesting and complex. And also Octavia Spencer, who is consistently denigrated as just being the black help, but she has an inner voice of her own, and she externalizes it. She has an outer voice as well. But the movie absolutely finds the centre in the form of Sally Hawkins, who is just majestic and silent as this character. It's one of those really interesting things whereby you take an actor's voice away from them and it throws all the more emphasis onto their physicality and particularly their facial expressions. And Sally Hawkins has always been a brilliantly physical actress. I mean, anyone who, going right the way back to things like Happy Go Lucky, the Mike Leigh film, will already know that. But in that, she was famously vocal. Her character wouldn't shut up in that film. In this, she doesn't say one word apart from one key scene, which I won't give away the context, but which is absolutely wonderful. And it's about the relationship that she shares with this asset played by Del Toro regular Doug Jones, who again brings a wonderful physicality to the role. He's not just a monster; he's a monster who makes a human connection with this mute woman. And I think this is one of the great things about the movie. What I took away from it is that it's about role playing. It's about people who ostensibly are occupying certain roles. So you have. Octavia Spencer is the black woman in 1960s America. She's the help. She's consistently downtrodden. Sally Hawkins is the apparently vulnerable, ineffectual, mute woman. The asset is just apparently just a monster, but he's actually more than a monster. Michael Shannon is more than just a horrible government agent, although his actions are really appalling as the film goes on. Richard Jenkins isn't just the guy living next door. There's more to him than that. Michael Stuhlbarg has there's a whole other side to his character. He's brilliant. Again, he's had a brilliant London Film Festival this year with this and Call Me By Your Name. He's in both films. So it's a movie about role-playing, and it's a movie about how reality often feels theatrical. A movie often feels artificial. This is a classic Guillermo Del Toro trope. I mean, it goes right there back to the interweaving of fairy tale and real life in Pan's Labyrinth. That was a movie that mashed up Civil War with fairy tale wonder. That was really, really interesting. It's a classic Guillermo Del Toro staple. You think also of the way that the nature of ghosts imposes on the Civil War in The Devil's Backbone, which might actually be my favourite Guillermo Del Toro movie. So this is a classic trope, and it falls very much into his wheelhouse. It's a movie that's in love with the nature of movie making, with the nature of fantasy, with the nature of fable, except this time it's anchored, I think, to probably his most human and recognisable and emotional and certainly funny story. It's a funny film. The response of the LFF audience, people were belly laughing all the way throughout this, properly belly laughing. There are some really, really funny moments in it, particularly, I have to say, from Richard Jenkins, who is absolutely magnificent. So it's brilliantly acted, it's really human, it makes political statements, it's a mashup of musical, fairy tale, sci-fi, horror, social study, comedy, all of these different things, and yet all interweaves brilliantly. Whereas I think in some instances with Del Toro, some of his movies have conceptually interesting ideas, but they aren't the execution leaves a lot to be desired. I'm thinking of like recent examples like Pacific Rim and Crimson Peak here. Those movies left me a bit cold. This has a real knockout emotional impact. Not only is it absolutely scrupulously beautiful, and Dan Laustsen's cinematography is gorgeous, and again interweaves fantasy and reality together. Alexandre Desplat's score has those familiar piping orchestrations that you've heard in a lot of his other scores. It interweaves the accordion for a bit of added, the dreaminess and romance. That is all wonderful. So it's a treat to just be engulfed by, like Blade Runner. Similarly, like Blade Runner, it's actually quite a similar experience. You can be just as engulfed by this as you were by Blade Runner. I think almost certainly Guillermo del Toro's best film next to Pan's Labyrinth and The Devil's Backbone. So go and see it. It's out in the UK next February. I was lucky enough to see it at the LFF. It's called The Shape of Water, and I can't urge you to see it enough.